All right, good morning. We are in our last week of Menachos. Isn't that amazing? Been a haul. We've got 8.5 pages to go. We've got 5 shiurim to do it in. We're in good shape. The cow has arrived, I am told. The chulin cow has arrived, which is an amazing technological, it's real. It's like 3D.
We get hands on.
This is going to be amazing, right? If you are at home and you'd like to name the cow, sponsorships are available, right? Elkie the cow, Elmer, all kinds of good names that are available. I think it's a cow. It's a female cow, right? It's udders.
Yes.
So it's a female cow. So, right, female names appreciated, right?
Yeah.
So why would you get a female instead of a male?
Because that's like, it's a cow. It's a cow. Otherwise, they're bulls. It's different.
Exactly.
Different. Okay.
Awesome.
So let's continue on. Ravashi. Ravashi says, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down. Ravashi. Ravashi says, Amris lishmata kame de Rav Nachman. So this Rav Shimon's discussion, we were talking about in the Pigel, right? And we were talking about what Rabbi Shimon said about the animal being able to, I think the issue was being metame, it was able to become tamei ba'ochel when he had in mind during the shchita to make it pigul, right? And we had suggested because it didn't have a time that it was ever permitted, therefore that's why, and it was able to become, it was able to not be tumas ochlin. Anyway, so now let's discuss this. Afilu tema lon mamish. Even if you say that the cow was left over before the blood was sprinkled, meaning, right, that the korban they shechted it and they have not sprinkled the blood, right, and we said, well, because if you could have done it, it's as though it's already done. That's what we had said. So therefore, we had to come up with a circumstance where it was not possible for you to throw the blood. So we said that it was slaughtered right before nightfall. We said, no, it doesn't even have to be that way, right? It could be that it was left overnight, right? Va'afilu tema de pigol bezrika. And you might even say, when he had the wrong intention during the throwing of the blood, which means that it was perfectly fine. They did shchita. It was food. It was right here. It was food, but they never threw the blood for this korban, and so therefore it never became permitted. And de iboy porik amrinon, iboy havis zorik lo amrinon. But the difference is going to be that we don't say that you can we do say that you could have redeemed the animal. We don't say you could have thrown the blood, right? We had suggested that when it came to kodshim, when it came to this piece of meat, that since I could have redeemed it, even if I didn't redeem it, it's still food, and therefore it can be getting tuma as food. However, when it came to throwing the blood, we said that therefore you also have to suggest that since you could have thrown the blood and you didn't throw the blood, it's as though you've already thrown the blood. Not so. This is what Ravashi is suggesting. We say that since you could have redeemed it, you could have redeemed it, but we don't say that if you could have thrown it, you could have thrown it. Why? Because redeeming is just a mindset. You could just say, I'm hereby redeeming it. Throwing it is an action. I could have, but didn't throw the blood, doesn't make the blood thrown. Okay, so that's what he suggests is a big difference, which means that an animal that has been shechted and I didn't throw the blood, and the pigul occurs after that, can still not receive tumas ochel because it was never permitted. Meisvei. So we asked the following question. The Bnei Yeshiva asked the following question. Kal Amar Rabbi Yeshua. This is what the rule that Rabbi Yeshua said about the rules of me'ilah. Right? Me'ilah is the prohibition of using something that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, something that is kodesh. There's no way to get rishus, right? It's a korban, so you can't use it. Kol shahaiso lo shas heter lekohanim. Anything that at one moment was permitted for kohanim to eat, ein mo'alin ba, you don't commit milah, because now you're just taking something that belongs to the kohanim. We're not taking something that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash at that point. V'chol shelo haiso lo shas heter lekohanim, and anything that never was permitted to the kohanim, it was always prohibited. Mo'alin ba, if you use that, then you have committed mi'ilah. Ve'ezehu shas heter lekohanim. What makes it permitted to the kohanim? Shalona v'shenitmes v'sheyatza. When it stayed overnight, when it became tamei, or when it left the Beis Hamikdash. In all of those circumstances, at one point or another, it was permitted. So lana means it was, right, it was kosher, perfectly edible meat. You left it overnight, now it becomes no good. It was perfectly edible korban, and then it became tameh. It was perfectly edible korban, and then it left the azara. So all of those things are ruined the korban, but at one point it was permitted. What are those things that never were permitted? Pigel, when I did the pigel intent during shchita, meaning as soon as I shechted it, I had in mind that this should be pigel. It was never valid. As soon as the animal shechted, as soon as the animal died, it became pigel, it became ruined. Also, shekiblu psulin v'zarku, somebody who was a non-kosher kohen caught the blood. Immediately, the korban is not valid. So therefore, it never became permitted. A non-kosher korban, well, a zar is we wouldn't call him a non-kosher, non-kohen, right? Somebody who's not a kosher korban, kohen. He doesn't have to be a non-kosher kohen. He could be a person who's not even a kohen, right? That's somebody who ruins the korban if he does the service. Ketani miha reisha. Now, at the beginning it said, shalona v'shinit mes v'shiyatza, that if it stays overnight and if it becomes tameh and if it left the azara. My love, lona mamish. So what we're saying is that the animal really was the animal, you didn't throw the blood, and nevertheless, the animal was left overnight, and we're considering that to be something that was permitted. Now, you just said that if they didn't throw the blood, we don't consider as though he's already thrown the blood. Now this Bryce is suggesting that even though we didn't throw the blood, the fact that the animal was kosher means that it's no longer me'ilah, but nobody ever threw the blood. So ve'i hacha diboy hava zariku. This case would then be a circumstance where it only would be valid if you did throw the blood, but you didn't throw the blood. But you could have. So therefore, since you could have, it becomes permitted. So katani de'imol, we say there's no me'ilah. So you see, we do say that if you could have done it, then it's considered as if it's already done. So the answer is lo, not true. Ru'uya latzeis v'ru'uya latame u'ru'uya, and we're going to take that last line in Ru'uya lal in Rashi. We say we're going to take that out. Means that what's happening is that the korban had the blood already thrown, and it was now appropriate to only become ruined if you took it out of the azara or if you made it tameh, because otherwise it will be 100% able to be eaten. Right, so we take the ru'uya lolin out, because what happened was it actually was a kosher korban. You actually threw the blood. We're not saying it says if you threw the blood. No, you did throw the blood. That's the circumstance here. Aval lina mamish, but if it did go overnight before you threw the blood, what will be the halacha? Hachanami demolin. It would be considered me'ilah because it was never permitted to the kohanim. So hai kol shayolushas heter lekohanim, the kol shloisa lushas heter lekohanim. So, one second though, the Mishnah says anything that was permitted to the Kohanim, it's not Me'ilah, and anything that was permitted to the Kohanim, it is not Me'ilah. Kol sheyesh lo shas heter leKohanim mo'alin ba, v'kol she'ein lo shas heter leKohanim mo'alin ba miboilei. It should say not anything that didn't have a chance. It should say anything that was at one point permitted, not anything that had a moment that it could have been permitted to the Kohanim. Anything that it should say anything that was permitted to the Kohanim. So you're right, that's a fair point. Ela Amar Ravashi, Sir Ravashi says instead, Me'ila atuma karamis, you're right. But there's a difference between Me'ila and Tuma. You're talking about Me'ila. You're right. This Bryce is telling us that something that you didn't throw the blood, it's as though the blood was already thrown in order to make it not Me'ila. That's true. But in order to make it into food so that it is now able to, it can receive Tuma, that's a whole different ballgame. Me'ila mishum kedusha, velav kedusha. Me'ila, the issue is it holy or is it not holy? Right? So therefore, this animal, right, once it is able to have the blood thrown, the status of kedusha diminishes, and lebasar depaka la kedusha sa b'may hadra rachvala. So once it gets its status reduced, because you could throw the blood and then make it permitted to eat, how would it it's just automatically not me'ila anymore. So that's enough to say. But tuma mishum uchla v'lav uchla. But tuma is a matter of edible food. So therefore, it is either edible or it's not, right? Not that the status can be reduced because you could throw the blood. It's just that it is edible or it's not. Kol chedi boy zorik matzi zorik lei, mashvila uchla. Anytime that you could have thrown the blood and you do throw the blood, it becomes food. And so therefore it's metame tumas ochlin. Then it can transmit tuma as far as food is concerned because you actually threw the blood. But if you could have thrown the blood, but you actually didn't, at the end of the day, lo mashviluch, you didn't turn it into food. And if it never became food, lo matami tumas ochlin, then it cannot transmit tuma as food. Okay, meisvei. Let's ask this question. Hamevi asham tolui. Okay, so let's go on to this discussion. We're trying to be able to figure out, right, what the topic of conversation for the last couple of pages has been, can I consider something that is able to be done as though it's already been done? That's really the issue at hand, right? As far as we've now suggested there's a difference between for me'ila's sake and for food's sake. Okay, let's talk about another case like that. Meisvei. Hamevi Osham Toli. The old Osham Toli case. Osham Toli is I have two pieces of meat. One is kosher and one is not kosher, and I eat one of them, and I don't know whether I eat the kosher one or the non-kosher one, so what do? So now I bring this korban Osham Toli, this guilt offering, which is, I don't know offering, right? I'm in doubt. So I'm
known as debatable offering.
It's what? Known as the
debatable offering.
Debatable, okay, yeah. It's dependent, right? I'm not sure. So what happens if I find out, I bring that offering, if I find out later that I did the Aveira, I have to bring a korban chatas anyway, because it doesn't take away the Aveira, it takes away the doubt. What if I find out that I didn't do the Aveira and then I don't bring the korban, right? Now, here's the question. At what point do I find out I didn't do the Aveira? So he's bringing this Asham Tolui. Noda shelo chata. He finds out that he didn't do the Aveira. Imad shelo nishchat noda lo. If he finds out that he didn't do the Aveira before he brought the korban, yetze v'yer be'eder. Then just put his animal back. Why? Because he sanctified the animal as an Asham Tolui on the condition that he needed one. Now that he finds out that he doesn't need one, the animal's fine. Put it right back in the flock. It's not, it goes back to chulin. No harm, no foul. And no animals either. Okay? So now, Rabbi Meir says, the Chachamim disagree. They say, Yirad Yistayev. No. It is sanctified to a degree, and therefore you have to let it go get a blemish first. Then once it gets a blemish, then Yimacher, you need to sell it. And since it's now already Kodesh, Yiplu Damav Linadava, the money that you then sell it for goes to the Beis HaMikdash, and you use it to purchase gifts for the Beis HaMikdash, for korbanos. You buy animals to use when the Beis HaMikdash, when the Mizbeach is otherwise not in service. Okay, so they are disagreeing as to whether the animal remains sanctified or not. Okay, fair enough. Rabbi Eliezer says, Yikrov. No, go ahead and bring it as a korban anyway. Why? Because if it's not for this Aveira, there's something else you probably did. Go ahead and bring it. Now, this is Rabbi Eliezer according to his shita, because Rabbi Eliezer holds that you can always bring a korban Asham Toli. Right? Everybody else says you have to have a reason to give an Asham Toli. It's not a korban unless you are sure that you have a doubt. Right? That makes sense. But if I just decide, you know what, I don't know if I did an Aveira, I may as well bring an Asham Toli. Can't do that. Rabbi Eliezer says, sure you can. I'm in doubt. If you feel like, hey, maybe there's an Aveira that you need it for, bring it. Right? So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, you didn't bring it for this one. Go ahead and bring the animal anyway. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, now what happens if Misha Nishchat Nodalo? What happens if they did Shchita? Now they've done Shchita, and now he finds this, but he says, hey, here's your non-kosher meat. I guess you ate the kosher one, right? Now what happens? Hadam yishafech vehabasar yisaref. Now you spill out the blood and you burn the meat. It's not. It's a pasul korban. You didn't need to bring it. Nizra kadam. However, what happens if the blood was already thrown? Now the korban's done. Habasar yeyachel. Now, even if you find out afterwards, the kohanim can still eat the meat, because once the korban's done, it's done. Right now, it's kosher korban. Okay. Rabbi Yossi says, afilu hadam bakos. Even if you didn't throw the blood, even if you caught the blood in the vessel, in the container, in the cup that you're going to throw the blood in, yizarek, go ahead and throw the blood. V'habasar yeyachel, and then you can eat the meat. V'amar Rava, and Rava says about that, for Rabbi Yossi, b'shitas Rabbi Shimon Amar. Rabbi Yossi is agreeing with Rabbi Shimon's shita, de Amar kol ha'omi lizrok kezorok dami, that anything that could be thrown is considered as if it's already thrown. So therefore, since he's got the blood and he hasn't thrown it yet, the Chacham say can't throw that. He says, no, you can go ahead and throw that, and that's fine. Okay. Now, according to Rava, right, explains that right, we had suggested that Rabbi Shimon had said this rule of only that which is able to be thrown is considered as though it's already thrown only applies to a case of me'ilah, not other circumstances. According to this, if we're explaining Rabbi Yossi, according to Rabbi Yossi Shita, this idea that I could throw the blood, it's as though I've actually thrown the blood, seems to be universal. That's Rabbi Yossi says that's the halacha. So therefore, if it becomes possible for some reason to be able to throw, it's considered as though you could throw it anyway. So the Gemara says no. Midihu taima. What is that the reason why Rabbi Yossi says, like Rava, that anything that Rabbi Yossi is suggesting the reason why you can throw the blood is because it's considered as though it's already thrown? Amri b'marava, they said in Eretz Yisrael mishmei Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, in the name of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, hainu tamid Rabbi Yossi. That's not why Rabbi Yossi says you can go ahead and throw the blood. It's not because it's already thrown. It's for a different reason. Tekasavar klisharis mekadjinis apsulin lechatchila likarev. He holds that once it's in the utensil, it has already been sanctified to a high enough level that it's as though you can throw it onto the Mizbeach anyway. You're not throwing it because it's as though it's already thrown. You're throwing it because it has been elevated in this utensil to the status of it doesn't matter what happened to everything else, you can throw it anyway. And it's not valid until you throw it, but you still have to throw it. Okay, so now, let's continue to discuss Reb Shimon's Shita for a little bit longer. Amar le Rav Ashi Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi says Rav Kahana. Midam Rabbi Shimon kol omid lizrok kazorok dami. If Rabbi Shimon is indeed saying that anything that can be thrown is as though it is already thrown, and like Rava's explanation of Rabbi Yossi's explanation, right? So, right, which we just said wasn't necessarily the case, but the way Rashi's learning this Gemara is we're going on the in case opinion. So he says, Kol omid lisrov nami kesarov dami. So if that's true, then anything which can be burned should be considered already burnt, right? Because that is consistent. If it's already, anything which can be thrown is as though it's already been thrown, so anything that can be burnt should be already burnt. So then nosar, leftover korbanos to the morning, upara, and the paraduma, which we said after was shechted, but before it was burnt, right? Amay metamin tumas ochin. Why should that be tamei as food? Since it's going to be burnt, we should consider it as though it's already burnt. And ashes are not food. So why is it that you suggested that they are food based on the fact that they were acceptable yesterday, and so now they're ruined, but they are still considered to be tamei tumas ochlin? They shouldn't be, because it should be as though they are already burned. Afar b'yamaninhu, they're ashes. Some are lay. So he said, you are correct. They're not able to transmit tuma because they are food. It's because chibas hakodesh mach sharton. It's because of a new rule, which is that something which has korban level sanctity is considered to be more beloved, and therefore we add an extra level of tumah. And it seems, I think, that it's a derabanan type of tumah. We're adding an extra. It's not tummy. These items are not tummy because they are food. They're tummy because they were once korbanos. And to treat them like non-korbanos now, just because they're the next day, doesn't seem right. So we're going to allow tumah to be transferred to them on a rabbinic level, because we're going to see there is such a concept potentially as on a derais level as well. But this chibas, because it's kodesh, it has an elevated level of tuma, despite the fact that it is not food. Okay. Amar le Ravina Ravashi, Ravina says to Ravashi, he de mahanya lehu chibas hakodesh levsuhu begufei. I understand that this concept of chibas kodesh, that it's beloved as holy items, therefore it's going to allow it to accept tuma as far as prohibiting it from being eaten. That I get. But likruye tami nami lemimne beirishon v'sheni, are you suggesting that it has the power that we're going to consider it able to not only receive tuma, but transmit tuma to the next level? Because we're calling it tummy. Something that is at its terminal level of tumah, we call that pasul. So you're telling me that now this animal, which is basically ashes already, halachically considered ashes, we're still going to allow it to transmit tumah to the next level? Well, then, if that's true, tifshol deboy Reish Lakish, then you should be able to answer. Reish Lakish had a question about that, because Reish Lakish said, Tsorid shel menachos. Let's say somebody has a korban mincha, and you've got all this flour, and you dump the oil, and you mix it up. There's bound to be dry spots, okay? In order to transmit tumah, you need, on a food level, you need it to get wet, right? It needs to get wet with one of 7 liquids. Yad shchat dam is the way to remember it. Wine, blood, oil, milk, dew, honey, and water. Those are your 7. So if all 7, any of those 7 touch your food, so then they can transmit tumah to the next thing. But if they're dry, if it's a dry food, it can't transmit tumah. So now I've got a dry piece of chunk of flour in this container. So now, this dry chunk, okay, monin bo rishon v'sheni or ein monin bo rishon v'sheni. I can understand that it can become tameh, right? But because it's a korban, right? And it's not going to receive tumah because it's food. It's receiving tumah because of chibas kodesh, right? This other new type of thing. It's because it's sitting in a utensil. It's about to be used for a korban, so therefore it can receive tumah. Can it transmit tumah to the next level or not? That's what Reish Lakish wants to know. And you just said it's very clear that the answer is yes. So what's Reish Lakish asking? So the answer is no. Ki mi boile Reish Lakish de oraisa. Reish Lakish was asking whether the rule of transmitting tumah was a Torah rule. Ki kamrinan de rabbanan. But what we're saying about the paraduma and their ability to transmit tumah to the next level of the nosar, that's all rabbinic tumah. That for sure it can transmit it. For sure transmits tumah to the next level rabbinically. To say it transmits tumah on a Torah level because of chibas kodesh, that Reish Lakish was unsure of. Okay, and what's the difference? Who cares if it's rabbinic or Torah? The answer is because you burn, if it touches kachim, another korban, if it's tamei d'oraisa, you burn it. If it's tamei d'rabbanan, you don't. So therefore, it makes a difference practically what you do with whatever it touches. Says the next Mishnah. Okay, we're done with this issue of I could have, therefore I did. Right? Okay, we move on. Ha'omer alai, hare alai, b'machvas. Somebody says, I'm going to be bringing a korban that's a machvas, right? The old pan-fried offering. Vehevi b'marcheshes, and he brings it in the deep-fried pan. B'marcheshes vehevi machvas, or reverse. Ma shehevi hevi, whatever he brings is still a valid korban, v'deichav asolo yotza. But he didn't fill his obligation, because he said he was going to bring another korban. So this is just like, okay, congratulations, you just donated a second korban. Zu lehavi b'machvas vehevi b'marcheshes. If he says this flour right here, this is going to be a machvas, and he brings it as marcheshes, b'marcheshes vehevi machvas, or he says the marcheshes and he brings the machvas, hare zupsula. Now that's no good. Why? Because you promised to bring this one way, you brought it the other way. Now it's a pasul korban because you didn't fulfill your vow and an obligation towards this flour. Somebody says, I'm going to bring 2 esronos, lahavi b'kli echad, and he promises that he's going to bring it in one utensil. He's bringing a double offering in one utensil. V'hevi b'shnei kelim. And what does he do? He brings it in two separate utensils. B'shnei kelim, or he says he's going to bring in 2 v'hevi b'kli echad, and he brings it into one. Ma'shevi hevi v'deichav asolo yatza. What you brought, but that's not the korban you promised, right? You changed the circumstances, so it doesn't count. Elu b'kli echad v'hevi b'shnei kelim v'hevi b'kli echad. He says this one is going to be brought in 2 utensils, or this is going to be brought in 1 utensil. He brought it the wrong way. Harei upsul, and again, that makes it pasul. Harei alai shnei esronos. Person says, I'm going to bring 2 esronos lahavi b'kli echad to bring it in 1 utensil. V'hevi b'shnei kelim, and he brings it in 2 utensils. Amru lo b'kli echad nadarta, and they remind him, you said you were going to bring it in 1, right? So now he could fix it. But he doesn't. He krivan b'shnei kelim, so he brings it in 2 utensils anyway. Psulin, it's pasul, right? And you can't.
So this is where he doesn't say, I'm bringing this one.
Right, this isn't even he's saying this one. But because they reminded them, right? He should have said to them, I know this is a separate korban. But he didn't say anything, which means that he's thinking he's bringing the right thing, but he's not. Therefore, you can't consider it as though he brought a second korban, you have to presume he's bringing his korban incorrectly. And so therefore, it's puzzle. But kli echad kasherin. But if he then puts it into one utensil and fixes and listens to them, it would be kosher. If he says, I've got 2 esronos to bring in 2 utensils, vehevi bekli echad, and he brings it in 1 utensil. Amru lo b'shnei kelim nedarta. They say to him, no, you're supposed to bring it into 2 utensils. B'shnei kelim kshin. If he brings it, if he separates it out now and puts it into 2 utensils, that's kosher. Right? But nasno lekliachad, if he leaves it in the 1 utensil, kishtei menachos shinas arvu, then it's considered as though he's got 2 korbanos that are mixed together in 1 utensil, because he's got 2 separate korbanos. They're supposed to be brought in separate ones, and then they're mixed together. Now, we learned the halachos in that circumstance. You theoretically could bring 2 mixed together korbanos in 1 container. If you know that this side is definitely from this offering and this side is definitely from this offering, then you could take a kamitza from each side. You could do that. But if they're mixed up in such a way that you can't do that, then you can't do that. So the Mishnah just says, hey, follow those rules. Like we said before, it's a mixed up offering. Follow those rules. Says the Gemara, Utsricha. Why do I need both of these cases? I get it. If you did what you said you were going to do, then it works. And if you didn't, so then it's a separate korban. Why do I need both those cases? Diashmin and Hoch Kamaisa. If you tell me about the first case where he said machvas and marcheshes, mishum da machvas kamaisi b'marcheshes. It's because he said he's going to bring it in a machvas, and he brought it in a marcheshes. But in the second case, he didn't change. He said he was going to bring a machvas. He's bringing a machvas. It's just that he brought it into 1 utensil, or he brought the flour in 1 utensil or 2. Maybe that distinction is insubstantial. Unsubstantial, right? So therefore, he brought both of them into a marcheshes. He's fine. He said he was bringing 2 machvas. He said he was bringing 2 marcheshes, and he did that. So the answer is no, can't do that. And if you told me the second case, it's mishum de kapoligluhus, because he's splitting it up. He said very clearly, I'm splitting this korban into 2. But there, when he's talking, just mixing up between the marcheshes and the machvas, he didn't specify whether he's bringing 2 or 1. It was just he's bringing what he brought. Said he's bringing 1. He's bringing 1. So imalo, I might have thought that he doesn't have to bring another one. He's still yotzei, because that wasn't a significant change, because he still brought 1 korban. Tzrichas therefore tells me no, both of those changes are significant. Tana Rabbanan, rabbis learned. Ma shehevi hevi v'dei nidro lo yatsa. Right? The Brisa says, like our Mishnah, that a person who does these changes, he brings the korban anyway, but he's still got another korban to bring, the one he originally promised. Rabbi Shimon says, Af yidei nidro nami yatsa. He says, nope, you've also fulfilled your mitzvah, right? Never, even still. Because everything is determined, according to Rabbi Shimon, not by what you said at the beginning, by whatever you do at the end. So therefore, even if you said machvas, you put it in marcheshes, it means you meant a marcheshes. So it's considered acceptable, and the korban is valid, and that's what you promised. That's how Rabbi Shimon learns. Okay, the Mishnah says, Zu lahavi b'machvas. It says, I'm bringing this flour in a machvas. So then it's possible, because you said specifically that's what you're going to do here. V'hatanya, but one second, we learned in a brisa, lo kidshum kli shares, that the mincha doesn't receive kedushas haguf, doesn't receive physical sanctity when you put it in the container. So therefore, why is it that if he puts it into the machvas, it becomes invalid? Why don't you just take it out and put it in the marcheshes and fix it? What's the big deal? It's not undoable, because we learned dry utensils, the dry utensils are not sanctifying. So Abaye says, Lo kidshum li karev, aval kidshum li pasel. Oh, this is where. So he says what happens is that it's the kamitza. He says he's doing the kamitza in order to make it a machvas. He didn't actually put it into the marchesh, because I guess at that point you couldn't fix it because it's already being fried up. But you you fried it up and then you put it into the utensil. They crumbled it up. That was the procedure, right? Yep. They made it and then they crumbled it up. So now, if I take the kamitza, why is it such a problem, right? So now just, right, so how are you supposed to fix that? I guess this is about the second case. I guess the case about the 1 utensil versus the 2 utensils, it must be. Because I don't think you could switch from a marcheshes to a machvas. It must be the case. It must be the case where I put it into 2 utensils and I was supposed to put it into 1 utensil. So the question is, why is it that you're not able to just fix it? put it in two utensils into one utensil. And Abaye says, because once you put it, you're right, it doesn't sanctify, if I put it into the wrong utensil, it doesn't sanctify it to make it eligible as a korban, that's correct. But it does sanctify it to ruin it. We've had that concept before, that putting it into the wrong utensil does ruin a korban, even if it doesn't make it good. So therefore, I can't take it out and put it back. So therefore, it stays puzzle. Abaye says, Lo shanu ella shekavon bishas neder. Now, this rule about that it was established as a machvas only works if when he made his original oath, he said, I'm making a machvas. Aval bishas hafrasha, but if he promised, I'm going to bring a mincha, and he didn't specify. Then, as he's separating his flour out, he says, this is a machvas. Lo, that's meaningless. Why? Because the pasuk says, kasher nadarta, you have to bring what you swore. Lo kasher ifrashta, which means you can only designate it as a marcheshes or as a machvas at the moment that you take your original oath. If you didn't specify original oath, you can't now specify. It doesn't matter that you specify it later. There's only certain times that I can specify and turn it into a machvas or a marcheshes, and those times are when I actually make my original oath and when I actually make it in the containers. Itmar Nami, it has also been said, Amar Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina, Amar Rav Asi, the Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina says in Rav Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, then Rabbi Yochanan, Lo Shanu, Ela Shekavon B'Shas Neder, it only works if you establish it when you took the oath, Aval B'Shas Hafrasha, Lo, but if you did it when you separated it, it wouldn't, Kasher Nadarta V'Lo Kasher Ifrasha, because we only can specify what type of korban it is at the time that you took the oath, not at the time you separate the ingredients. Next Mishnah, Ha'omer, person says, Harei alai mincha min ha'seorim. Person says, I'm bringing a korban mincha that's from barley. So that does not matter. There are no individual, there are korbanos from barley, right? The ones that come from barley, the korban ha'omer and the sota. But an individual has no korban, there's no korban mincha that an individual can donate that comes from barley. So what happens? Yavi minachitim, he has to bring his korban mincha from wheat. Kemach, he says, I'm going to bring kemach. Now, there is no, which is not extra sifted, right? The fine flour. There is no individual korban. The korban minchas chote, we said, has to be brought from kemach, regular flour. But every other individual donated korban has to be brought from solas. So what happens? Yavi solas, he brings the solas anyway. Below shemen, below levona. If he says, I'm going to bring my korban without oil or without frankincense, that's irrelevant. Because all of the individual offerings that can be donated need oil and they need frankincense. Chatzi, so Yavi Shemen Levon, he has to bring it. Chatzi Isaron, if he says, I'm going to bring a korban that's half an Isaron. We know there's no such thing as a korban. Isaron is the smallest size. Yavi Isaron Shalom, he has to bring an Isaron anyway. Isaron Amechsi says, I'm going to bring 1.5. Yavi Shnaim, you got to bring 2. We round up because the second one counts for something. Rabbi Shimon Poter. Rabbi Shimon says, in that circumstance, you don't have to bring anything. Why? Shilis nadiv kederach hamis, or I guess in all of these circumstances, you don't have to bring anything. Why? Shilo his nadiv kederach hamis nadvim, because you didn't promise to do anything that makes any sense. I'm going to bring a korban that's made of barley. You might think you did, but it's not. You can't, right? So since you can't, your korban, your pledge means nothing. Okay.
This question is, do you round up that he has to bring something?
That's that last part, right? Do you have to bring up or not? According to Rabbi Shimon, you don't bring anything. And I think Rabbi Shimon was talking about all of the cases in the Mishnah. Because if I swore that I was going to bring a mincha of barley, that's also meaningless. If I swore that I was going to bring a mincha of kemach, it also is meaningless. So in all these circumstances, since you didn't swear to bring something that a person individual can bring, it's meaningless. Now the Gemara is going to go and try to figure out what's going on in our Mishnah here. Amai, why is it that if the person swears that he's going to bring a korban mincha that's barley, that he still has to bring a korban mincha of wheat? Neder upischo imohu. He has the neder, but he also has the way out of it, because he can always go to a rabbi and say, "I intended to bring one of barley. I didn't know I couldn't bring one of barley. So therefore, now that I find out I can't bring one of barley, I don't have to bring any mincha. I'm out. I should be out of it, right? So therefore, why does he still have to bring the mincha that's wheat? So Amar Chizkiah, so Chizkiah posits, Hamani, whose opinion is this? Beis Shammai he. This is Beis Shammai's perspective. Da'amri tfos lashon rishon. He holds that generally the rule is that when somebody takes an oath and he's got 2 contradictory statements, we follow the first half of the statement and we ignore the second. Because you've already sworn. By the time you get to the second half of the sentence, you've already finished the first half counts. So if he says, I'm bringing a mincha, now he's obligated in a regular mincha. From barley, we ignore that part. That's Beis Shammai's opinion. Ditznan, we learn in a Mishnah. that says, Hareini Nazir min agrogros. If somebody says, I am a Nazir from dried figs, umina dvela, or pressed dates. Beis Shammai Yomrim Nazir. Beis Shammai says he's a Nazir, right? Even though figs and dates have nothing to do with being a Nazir. He said, I'm a Nazir. So now once he says, I'm a Nazir, he's a Nazir. The next part of the statement is irrelevant. Beis Hillel Remaino Nazir. Beis Hillel says he's not a Nazir. It was conditional, right? The next statement is conditional. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan, Afilu Tema Beis Hillel. Rabbi Yochanan says our Mishnah doesn't have to follow Beis Shammai, right? We're suggesting our Mishnah follows an opinion that we don't follow, right? Could be. Rabbi Yochanan says that even Beis Hillel, this could even be Beis Hillel's opinion. Ilu hayisi yodea she'ein nodrin kach lo hayisi noder kach elakach. What happened? Omer. What he says, if I had known that I couldn't do barley, I would have done wheat. That's what he says afterwards. He follows up, right? He finds out. In other words, he says, not only I swore I'm going to bring a mincha from barley, and they say you can't bring barley. Oh, I'll do it wheat then. Well, now he's obligated. That's the circumstance of our Mishnah. Obviously, if he changes his mind and says, oh, I can't bring barley, then forget it. You're right. Then according to Rabbi Yochanan, the Mishnah would mean that you're not liable to bring it. Amar Chizkiah, Rav Chizkiah says, Lo shanu ela da amar mincha min ha'sa'orim. Chizkiah qualifies this ruling. This really only applies if he says, I'm going to bring a mincha from barley. Aval amar mincha min ha'adashim. What if he says, I'm going to bring lentils? Right? Does that count as a mincha? No, that is not a mincha. Why? Right? Because the only way this works is if you can explain that he made a mistake. He thought that he could bring one of barley. Why? Because there are mincha offerings that come from barley. There's no such thing as a mincha from lentils. So therefore, that statement, I'm bringing a mincha from lentils, is truly meaningless. And therefore, Chizkiah says, even Beis Shammai would say, that is not a valid oath in that circumstance. Now, Michti, let's take a look at this. Chizkiah, according to Chizkiah, Kiman Amar Lishmate, how did he explain our Mishnah? Beis Shammai. He says like Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says Mishum Tefos Lashon Rishonu. Beis Shammai says we always follow the first statement. So Mali Minas or Mali Minas Hadashim. Why does it make a difference what his second statement is? Who cares how ridiculous the second half of his statement is? He could say I'm bringing a mincha from cows. It makes no difference because he said I'm bringing a mincha. Once he says I'm bringing a mincha, then he's got to bring wheat. Why does it matter what he says? So the answer is Hadar Bey. Chizkiah changed his mind. First, he thought that the Mishnah was Beis Shammai. Then he realized, nah, I don't like that. I would prefer to say that the Mishnah is really Beis Hillel. And what Beis Hillel is saying is that it makes sense that if you said, I'm bringing a mincha from barley, since there are menachos that come from barley, it could be you made a mistake. Therefore, if you clarify after the fact that I would have brought wheat, then he still brings wheat. But if he says, I'm bringing a mincha from lentils, that's just crazyville. So therefore, even if after the fact he changes his mind and says, I would, if I'd known I couldn't bring it from lentils, I would bring wheat, it doesn't matter. It's already irrelevant because the statement made no sense when you said it. And therefore, that's how you do it. So basically, Chizkiah changed his mind. And Chizkiah says, I don't think it follows Beis Shammai anymore. I like Beis Hillel's answer. Umay time Adarbe. Why did he change his mind? He had a good explanation for the Mishnah. Why did he change his mind? So Amar Rava says, Masnisin Kashise. He looked at the Mishnah and he said, the text of the Mishnah bothers me. Why did the Mishnah, if it was really Beis Shammai, why pick barley? Right? If it doesn't make any difference, why pick barley? Less name min adashim. Bring the bigger chiddush. Say that even if he said lentils, it would still be the same thing because Beis Shammai says it doesn't matter what you say second. Right? That would be a better way to explain Beis Shammai's opinion. Ella Shma Mina, from the fact that it says from barley, right? Mishum Detoihu, it's because it has to be barley, because that's something you would make a mistake with. So Besorim Toi. So with barley, you'd make a mistake. Ba'adashim L'Toi, you wouldn't make a mistake with lentils. That's why the Mishnah picked barley. Therefore, the Mishnah must be following Beis Hillel's opinion, and he changed his mind. For Rabbi Yochanan, now Rabbi Yochanan comes along and he says, Afilu min adashim. Rabbi Yochanan says, even if it's from barley, even if it's from lentils, it's still valid. Now, we're going to ask this question. 1 second. Mechti, let's take a look at Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan kaman amr b'lishmate. How did Rabbi Yochanan interpret our Mishnah? He said it's Beis Hillel. He said that our Mishnah is following Beis Hillel. So Beis Hillel mishum detoihu. The whole reason why Beis Hillel says that his oath to take a mincha from barley is valid is because he could have made a mistake and thought barley was valid, and now he really has to bring from wheat. Besaorin toi, badashim lotoi. Barley is something you could make a mistake with. Lentils you couldn't make a mistake with. So if he's holding it's Beis Hillel's opinion, how is he saying that even if he had said barley, lentils, that it would be a valid oath?
How can you make a mistake between with barley, not with lentils?
Because barley is something that is brought as a korban mincha, as a korban tzibor, in a community offering. You have barley offerings when it comes to the korban omer. You have a barley offering when it comes to a sota. You never have a lentil offering, so therefore it would be crazy for the person to make a mistake and think lentils, right? So the answer is, what's Rabbi Yochanan saying? L'divrei de Chizkiah ka'amar lei. Rabbi Yochanan is saying, Chizkiah, not so fast. Why are you changing your mind? You changed your mind and you turned it on to Beis Hillel. You agreed with me? Why do you agree with me so fast? You can hold your opinion. He says, At my time hadrabach. Why'd you change your mind? Mishum delo katani min adashim. He said, why? Because it doesn't say lentils. Dilma lo mi bai kamar. Maybe the Mishnah is saying, I don't even need to say it, meaning, lo mi bai min adashim. Obviously, if a person says that if I'm making a mistake from I'm bringing my mincha from lentils, dikal meimer mahadar hu dehadar bay, I might think that I am changing my mind, and therefore that's when Beis Shammai says you can't change your mind. Tfos lashon rishon. You have to go after what he said first, because you can't change your mind once you've said something. So tfos lashon rishon. That's when Beis Shammai says you hold on to your first language. Ela afilu min hasaorin, but even in a circumstance where he says, I'm bringing a mincha from barley, nami, even in that circumstance, Beis Shammai says, you still have to bring it from flour. Why? From wheat. Because you could still say he made a mistake, and that was his original oath. His original oath was to bring a mincha from barley, which makes no sense. It's reasonable to presume that his original oath was actually about the barley. And nevertheless, afilu hachi, there you hold on to your opinion. You say, even in that circumstance, Tzvos Lashon Rishon, Beis Shammai says you still hold on to the first language. So why did you change your mind so fast? That's what Rabbi Yochanan was telling Chizkiah. I'm happy you agree with me, I guess, but there's no proof against your side. Amar Zeiri says, Lo shanu ela da'amar mincha. Right? This has to be a circumstance, though, that the person had to have said, I'm bringing a mincha from barley. Right? Aval lo amar mincha lo. But if he didn't say, if he only said is, I'm bringing from barley, then he has no obligation to bring anything. Right? Because he never promised. The only way that this works is if he actually made an oath of some kind to bring a mincha. If he made no oath, only said, I'm bringing barley, that's a meaningless statement. You can't bring barley, right? So therefore, the statement makes no sense. There's no word mincha in there. It is irrelevant. Yosef Rav Nachman Kamarlil Hashmata. So Rav Nachman was sitting and he was telling over this teaching. Eisvei Rava Rav Nachman, and Rava asked Rav Nachman the following question. Mishnah says kemach yavi soles, right? If he said I'm going to bring kemach, so then he has to bring soles. Lav delo amar mincha. Don't we understand the Mishnah to be saying that all he said is, I'm going to bring kemach? He didn't say the word mincha. Why is it that he's obligated to bring the soles then? So lo damar mincha. No, the Mishnah is being written shorthand. The Mishnah doesn't repeat it every time, but the Mishnah intends to say that he had to say, I'm bringing a mincha from kemach, even if the Mishnah doesn't use that language. Okay, then go to the next phrase. Below shemen u'levona. I'm going to bring without oil or frankincense. Yavi shemen u'levona. He has to bring it with oil and frankincense. My lav delo amar mincha. Isn't that where he didn't say the word mincha? Lo, again, no. The Mishnah is just shorthand. Da amar mincha. He does say mincha. Chatzi yisaron. The next case was where he says, I'm bringing half an yisaron. Yavi yisaron shomi. He's got to bring a full yisaron. My lav delo amar mincha. Isn't that a circumstance where he didn't say the word mincha? He says, lo, da amar mincha. He does say mincha. So therefore, the Mishnah writes it a little shorthanded, but the Mishnah intends to say that he says the word mincha. Okay, fine. If what you're saying is true, right? That he's saying, Harei alai mincha chatzi yisaron. That's what he's now saying. I am going to bring a mincha of half an yisaron. That's the circumstance that he's going to bring a full yisaron, because he said Harei alai mincha, right? And he made a mistake and said chatzi yisaron, but it really means a full yisaron. Ema seifa. Then the end part says, Isarnu mechza yavi shnayim. 1.5. If he says 1.5, he should bring 2. Now, why is that? Because Kevan de Amar Mincha, when he says the word Mincha, so Ichayev le Isaron, so he's obligated himself to bring 1 Isaron. Ki Amar Chati Isaron, lo klum kamar le. Lo kamarhu. The next part of the statement is meaningless, right? Let's look at what he said. I will bring a mincha of 1.5 Isronos. The first statement is, I will bring a mincha of 1. Period. That's totally fine. Then he made statement number 2, a half. He didn't use the word mincha over there. And we said, only if he says a mincha of a half does he have to bring another 1. So why is he bringing the second isaron? Oh, he says, I'm bringing a mincha of 1. That's 1. And then he says a half. That means nothing. So therefore he should be only bringing 1. He shouldn't be bringing 2. So lo tzricha. So you're right. We have to adjust the phraseology a bit. Damar, he must have said, Harei alai mincha chetzi isaron v'isaron. He must have said, I'm going to bring a mincha of a half plus 1. Because when he says a mincha of a half, that becomes a mincha of a half, which is 1, plus 1 is another 1. So now he brings 2. To Kevin Damar Mincha, once he says Mincha, Yichayev le bi Isaron, now he's obligated in a full Isaron. Kemar Chatzi Isaron, when he says half Isaron, v'lo klum kamer, that means nothing. Ki Hadamar Isaron, when he says a Isaron the second time, Maisi Isaron Achrina, now he's got to bring a second Isaron. That's why he brings 2. Okay, Ihachi. If that is true, so how do you understand Rabbi Shimon? Rabbi Shimon's whole logic was he doesn't bring anything because the statement is meaningless, right? Rabbi Shimon Poter, Rabbi Shimon's exempt. Sholis nadiv kederach misnadvin. So am I? What do you mean he didn't? He did. He said the word mincha. I'm bringing a mincha of a half plus 1. So why is it when he said a mincha that he doesn't have to bring anything? So Amar Rava, Rava says Rabbi Shimon b'shitas Rabbi Yossi Amra. Rabbi Shimon holds of Rabbi Yossi's opinion, and that is Damar Af Bigmar Dvar of Adam Matfis. He says that it's not like Beis Shammai looked at it as we only look at the beginning. Beis Hillel says we allow you to modify your second statement so that it doesn't contradict your first. Rabbi Yossi actually goes one step further and says we automatically presume your second statement modifies your first. So when you say a half plus 1, that's a meaningless statement, and that adjusts your mincha statement, and therefore it doesn't make any sense. So if you make a descriptive statement of your word mincha that doesn't make sense, it's just no good. So that's how Rabbi Shimon agrees with Rabbi Yosef. Yossi. Next Mishnah. Misnadev adam mincha shel shishim isaron. Right, a person promises that he's going to give a mincha of 60 Isronos. That's the maximum amount that he's allowed to give. Maybe b'kli echad. He can bring that in 1 utensil. Right? He's allowed to do that. We'll see why. If he says, I'm going to bring 61, maybe shishim b'kli echad, echad b'kli echad. He's got to bring 60 in 1 utensil, but the other one, the 1 more has to go in another utensil. He can't bring 61 into 1 utensil. Shekain, why? Shekain hatzibur maybe b'yom tov harishon shechag shechal yos b'Shabbos. Because if you count up the number of Isronos that comes in the biggest day of the year, the most korbanos of community korbanos on a single day, it's the first day of Pesach. On the first day of Pesach, we have 13,
They're saying sukkahs.
Sukkahs, I'm sorry, sukkahs, thank you. 13, we have 13 bulls. We have, which 3 esronos for each one is 39 esronim. 3, because it's 3 for 1. And then there's 14 sheep. That's another 14 because 1 per sheep. And that makes 53. And then there's 2 rams, which they each take 2 esronim each. That's another 4. That brings us to 57. And then you have 2 korban tamids, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. And each one of those is a sheep. And so therefore you bring, so therefore that brings another 2. And then you have 2 korban musafs of Shabbos, right? If this falls out on Shabbos, 2 korban musafs of Shabbos, another sheep, that gives you another 2, so that gives you 61. The day that, right, trivia question, what is the most flour that you can bring in communal offerings in 1 day? If the first day of Pesach falls out on Shabbos, 61. Okay, so that's the total number that you're bringing. Now, Sukkot first. Sorry, I keep saying Pesach. Sukkot, thank you. So if the first day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbos, it becomes 61. So therefore, if that's true, it makes sense. An individual shouldn't bring as much as the community. Community's got 61, therefore maximum for an individual is 60. Okay, so that's how that works. Okay.
So you don't one up the tzibur.
Don't one up the tzibur, or even the tzibur, which is interesting, right? We usually you can't even do. We would normally say a kal v'chomer. We would say that it's the same, right? But it is interesting. We actually want you one step below. Yeah, so that's interesting. Amar Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, "Valo elu leparim ve'elu lekvasim ve'enu nivlalim zeim zeh." 1 second though. We learned that you can't mix a mincha that's for bulls together with a mincha that's for sheep. Why? Because the concentration of oil to flour wasn't the same. And therefore the dough has different consistencies. You have to bring those. We had learned that if you have multiple bull offerings, you can mix them into one container. Multiple sheep offerings, you can mix them into one container. Maybe lechatchila, maybe not. But if I've got a bull offering and a sheep offering, I can't mix them into one container. Therefore, what is the relevance that I have 61 isronos of flour on one day? There's no circumstance where I'm offering all of that all at once. They're always going to be offered in separate containers anyway. So
the question, like, why combine them?
So why are you combining and saying 61 is the biggest amount that tzibur brings? No, it's not. The 39 is the biggest that tzibur brings because that's the 39 of the bulls. You can't combine that together with the sheep. So why are you combining? Ella, he says, that's not the reason. The reason is, ad shishim yichol li balel. The reason is because you've got the biggest container that you can hold 60 isronos, and can mix and have the oil mixed together with it in a good way. If you add more to the container, then it's going to fall out and it'll overflow. So therefore, we are saying that's the maximum size. That's it. Amrulo, so they say to him, shishim nivlalin. Well, it's not just the container size. It's that the oil that you put into it isn't going to absorb into the amount. Now, he's of the opinion, right? Remember, we had the argument whether when you have an offering, if you're going to donate 60, do you bring one lug for each of the isronos that you're bringing, or do you bring one lug for the entire offering? So he's going according to the Shita that says one lug for the entire thing. So if you're going to put one lug of oil in 60 isronos of flour, how are you mixing that into a dough? It doesn't mix well. So Amrulo, the Chum said, wait a second. Shishim nivlalin v'shishim v'echanin nivlalin. What are you telling me? If I put 60 isronos in and I mix it with a lug, that mixes well, but I add one more isron, it makes a difference? That doesn't mix well? What difference does one make? So slip one more in. So Amar Lehem, so he said to them, Kol midos chachamim. That's the way always the laws of measurements work with the chachamim. For example, a mikveh is 40 sa'ah, right? If you have a mikveh that's 40 sa'ah minus a few drops, it's not a kosher mikveh. What are you telling me? A person can't submerge himself in a mikveh that's less? Sure you can. The Chum say, this is the amount. That's it, 40 sa'ah. There's a line, that's it. So they say you draw the line. That's the way that shiurim work. So he's saying the shiur was established because that's the amount that the oil mixes in together. But once that's established as the shiur, don't argue with me that I can make it mix if it was a little bit more. That's the shiur. Okay, says no, stop here.
Yeah, good spot. Good spot. That's perfect.
Okay.
Go out, Rabbi Loiterman. Beautiful.